The Independent Electoral Commission has just released the results of the country's biggest by-elections. So let's look deeper now into what the trends were. And for this conversation, I'm joined by Mr. Wayne Sussman, who is an election analyst. Good to have you with us this afternoon, Mr. Sussman. Let's look at the performance of the smaller parties. We see some emerging there, with the Good Party gaining one from the DA in the Western Cape. We see Al Jamar coming up. We also saw, the Freedom Front Plus as well. What does this indicate? What could this be leading to?
Basically, when voters go into the supermarket, DA voters, they obviously now are seeing more and more choice. In 2019, maybe some of them saw the Freedom Front as a choice, but what we see from these results, from these elections last night, that many DA voters voted for the Patriotic Alliance in Rivoli in Johannesburg. Many DA voters in Lenasia voted for Al Jamar. Many DA voters in George voted for Good, or a local party there called the PBI. And many Afrikaans voters in the Northwest continue to vote for the Vryheidsfront Plus. And this is a real challenge and crisis for the DA, that they lost many safe seats last night, which shouldn't be competitive seats. And the party's got a lot of soul searching to do as these small parties gather more and more traction.
So what does this mean for the Democratic Alliance? They were, for lack of a better phrase, the biggest loser in these by-elections, having lost a total of 9 of their wards. What does this mean, and what could be leading to the decline in the Democratic Alliance?
Well, there were 2 bits of good news. They won a ward off the ANC in Walter Sisulu in the towns of Jamestown and Adwell North, and they also won a ward off for a local party in Henneman and Mpumalanga in Machabeng in the Free State, and they're going to probably take back Knysna municipality. But there's much more bad news for them. In a place like George, where they won an outright majority in 2016, it's very clear that they're probably not going to achieve that next time, and that parties like Good and the PBI are going to continue to grow there. You also see in the West, in places like Saldanha Bay, Good make huge inroads there. In Johannesburg, ANC and other small.
Unfortunately, Mr. Sussman, we've completely lost your audio there. We'll try and see if perhaps we can get you back on a better one. But maybe let's try, before we let you go, let's try once again. You were still talking about the performance of the Democratic Alliance in some of the wards and the municipalities. Okay, there we go. We've lost him completely. So we'll try and touch base with him once again as we continue breaking down what these figures mean for not only the Democratic Alliance. I mean, if you look, though, the ANC having stayed pretty strong, 64 seats that have been retained by the African National Congress. And if you look at the Eastern Cape, for example, where 19 wards were up for grabs, the ANC retained 18 of those wards. In the Free State, with 4 wards up, the ANC retained its 3 wards. And in Gauteng, out of 14 wards, the ANC retained 10 and got 2 of the wards back from the Democratic Alliance, which gives Gauteng a total of 12 in Gauteng. Looks like we've got Mr. Sussman back. Mr. Sussman, you were still talking about the performance of the Democratic Alliance, saying that perhaps it's not all doom and gloom for them.
That's correct, but it is mostly doom and gloom. I'm just saying, for DA supporters there and for the party, there were 2 or 3 bits of good news. The challenge is that across South Africa, in Johannesburg, a place where they did very, very well in 2016, they suffered big losses. In places like Saldanha Bay, in places like George, they suffered a lot of losses. So and by the way, also places in the Northwest and the Northern Cape, they need to reconnect with those voters. John Steenhuisen is now the leader of the party. He's got less than a month till the next round of by-elections. He needs to reconnect with DA activists and supporters and tell them why the party is still relevant and still a force to be reckoned with in South African politics.
So, by the look of these results, it seems like a loss of confidence then in the Democratic Alliance. Do you think that voters are not too happy about the direction that the DA is going to? Because It's post the elections not too long ago. There have been a lot of changes in the past year within the Democratic Alliance. What does this say about what voters are thinking of the DA right now?
Well, in places like Potchefstroom and parts of the Northern Cape, you're seeing more conservative DA voters flee the party. You're also seeing DA voters going to the EFF and the ANC and other smaller parties in other parts of the country. So the party is almost stranded. It seems like they've been let down the garden path and just don't know what to do next. But I do want to say that John Steenhuisen only became the leader a few days ago. I think this was a very difficult grace period. But in the next month, he needs to go to places like Oudtshoorn, wherever the DA are defending wards in December, and really show that the DA still speaks for these communities, many of these communities who turned their back on the DA yesterday. So he's got to reconnect, he's got to get his party focused and disciplined, and ensure that they're relevant to all their voters who voted for them in 2019 and those South Africans who've thought of voting for them before.
Talk to us, Wayne, about the performance of the economic freedom fighters. They were quite conspicuous in their absence in a lot of these results.
Yeah, so the EFF had 4 opportunities last night of winning wards. They didn't succeed in any of those. That's places like Seshego, places like Smithfield in the Free State, Tembisa in Ekurhuleni, and also Chaneng near Rustenburg. But the good news for the EFF is that they had breakthroughs in parts of the Northern Cape. A place like Renosterberg, which is where Premier Zamani Saul of the ANC comes from, they're going to win their first seat on the council there. In places like Polokwane, Hartswater in the Northern Cape, they're now the official opposition. I think they'll win 5 seats, up from 3 on the council there. So you are seeing them make inroads in various communities, but it was a mixed bag for the EFF. If you look at a party like the Vryheidsfront Plus, which obviously has much limited growth potential compared to the EFF is much more of a national player. The Vryheidsfront Plus are showing in by-election after by-election that we can grow because we are electing ward councillors across the Northwest province and maybe in other provinces as well. The EFF has won precious few ward elections across South Africa, and it just shows the challenge for them. They want to become the alternative government, but they need to start winning wards off the ANC.
What do these results perhaps indicate for the upcoming local, national local government elections in 2021? What could this be an indicator of?
This could be, there are some very interesting micro trends. I'll give an example in Tsansabani, which is Postmasburg, a mining town in the Northern Cape. You saw a local party who really give the ANC a run for their money. So are we going to see more and more local parties speak to local issues, basically saying that the bigger parties are out of touch with our specific issues, give us a chance. The bigger parties continue to fail you. That's something I'm looking out for. But if I'm the ANC and I look at the results today, it shows me that the overwhelming amount of voters, particularly in the rural areas, and you saw a turn back to the ANC in the city of Johannesburg, are favourable towards the party. Can they continue that momentum growing, or are the allegations about the Secretary General Ace Magashule, are the corruption challenges, the PPE challenges going to bite the party in the future? If one looks at a party... Yes.
No, go ahead, sir.
One looks at the smaller parties like Good and the Freedom Front and the African Christian Democratic Party. Can they continue to grow at the expense of disgruntled Democratic Alliance voters? Can the Freedom Front really grow their vote catching potential, or will they carry on being a party which only appeals to pockets of conservative opponents across South Africa? These are the questions to answer on the road to.
Well, Mr. Sussman, we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Certainly a lot of questions, and could this really be an indicator of where South Africa is leaning towards as far as their choice of leadership? We have seen smaller parties mushrooming up, and also it'd be quite interesting to look at the independent candidates as well. That is Mr. Wayne Sussman there, an election analyst.